Come with me today as we take a 14-hour flight on British Airways Club World. We're going to be flying from Singapore Changi Airport to London Heathrow Airport. If you enjoy the video, please subscribe, it really helps the channel. The flight is the longest on the British Airways network and comes in at nearly 11,000 kilometres or 7,000 miles. I'm going to be reviewing the food and drink that's available on the flight. I'm also going to take a look around the cabin and the facilities on board. Come with me for the next 14 hours. Our journey today begins at Changi Airport Terminal 1. This is the terminal that most oneworld airlines fly out of from Singapore, the exception being Cathay Pacific that flies out of Terminal 4. After clearing security, I made my way over to the British Airways Lounge. This is located on the upper level and is open at all times the British Airways flights are flying. I've posted a separate, more comprehensive review of this lounge, but needless to say, it wasn't a bad lounge to spend a short bit of time at. There was plenty of seating available, and on top of that, there was an incredibly wide selection of drinks on offer for you to take part in before your flight. The food, it wasn't bad, but again, as you'll see later in the video, this was not the best option at Changi Airport. I grabbed a quick bite here before I made my way over to the Qatar Airways Lounge. The Qatar Airways Lounge is located a few minutes walk from the British Airways Lounge. Even though I wasn't flying on Qatar, I had access to this because I was flying in a oneworld business class cabin. In my view, the Qatar Airways Lounge was far superior to the British Airways Lounge. I mean, take a look at this food compared to what I just showed you in the British Airways Lounge. The service was table service, a la carte, and they had a wide selection of food options as well as drinks for you to choose from. As you can see here, the food is restaurant quality, and the only problem that I had was that I almost filled up too much here and didn't have any room for food on the plane. Thankfully, it was a few hours until my flight, so I had no problem eating here and also eating on board once we took off. After a couple of hours in the lounge, we got notification that boarding was happening, so I made my way over to the gate. Boarding today was from gate C26, which is one of the furthest gates in Terminal 1. I wasn't complaining though, as it was quite nice to stretch my legs before a 14-hour flight. Shortly after I boarded, I took a look around the cabin. Unfortunately, as you can see here, seating is in a 2-4-2 configuration. In 2025, this is almost unheard of in business class for a major long-haul airline. I'm not a huge guy, 6'1", maybe 6'2" on a good day, but I found these seats a little bit cramped. As you can see from some of my other videos, the seat here is significantly narrower than what the competing airlines are offering on exactly the same route and, frankly, for pretty much the same cost. But at the end of the day, this is still a lie flat bed, which for a 14.5-hour flight, particularly at night, is most important, so I wasn't complaining too much. Thankfully, there's a seat divider that separates you and your seatmate. As I was travelling alone and didn't know my seatmate, this remained up the entire time. Although, if you're travelling with a loved one, you can put this down in order to communicate with them. Owing to the fact that the middle two seats are actually in reverse, you could effectively have a face-to-face conversation with them if you so wanted. The TV screen, again, was very dated. In an era when competing airlines are offering 20, sometimes even 30-inch, high-definition or 4K screens, this screen was honestly smaller than my iPad, and a lower resolution too. Not great. Shortly after takeoff, drinks were served. I went for a Diet Coke. They also offered salted rosemary snacks, which was various nuts covered in salt and rosemary. They were pretty good, perhaps a little bit dry. Not my favourite. I appreciated the stemware though. This was very high quality. Service on this flight was unfortunately quite slow. It was nearly 2 hours after takeoff that the first course of the meal eventually came. It didn't bother me, but this would be a problem if you wanted to go straight to sleep. The first course was a scallop and crab salad. Honestly, this was delicious. I have no complaints. The seafood was fresh, and it came with a side salad and bread. For a meal served 35,000 feet in the air, the taste, the presentation, top marks. As you can see here, I finished it. Apart from the radishes. I'm just not a fan of radishes. But the bread, also delicious. Next up was the main course. I forget exactly what this was, but it was basically some kind of stir-fried chicken with fried rice and vegetables. I'll be honest, this wasn't the best, particularly after the starter. I think the mistake I made was ordering Asian food on a British airline. It was okay, but having been spoiled for Asian food in Singapore, it was a little bit disappointing. Don't let the empty plate fool you. I ate it because I was hungry, and I wanted to eat before I went to sleep. But this was average at best. Next up was dessert. This was a bread and butter pudding with a cream sauce. This was actually pretty good. It was moist, flavoursome and tasty. I have no complaints about this. Actually, one complaint is maybe a little bit small, but I'm just being picky there. It tasted good, no genuine complaints. As they say, the proof of the pudding is in the taste, and my empty plate should show you that I enjoyed it. Unlike with the main course, you can read into this. It was tasty. Having finished my meal, I decided to go get changed into my pyjamas in the toilet. British Airways doesn't provide pyjamas for business class passengers, and so I had to bring my own. The toilets were fairly small, and they weren't stocked with the typical amenities you would expect in a business class toilet, like toothbrushes or shavers. Having gotten changed, I went back to my bed and got a good 8 hours sleep. This is quite impressive for a night flight for me, so I was happy. I woke up, and about 2 hours later, they served breakfast. Breakfast started with some fresh fruit, as well as a croissant and jam, and most importantly of all, coffee. All of this is pretty good. The yogurt was tasty, the croissant was fresh, the fruit was ripe, and the coffee, well, it's coffee. And what time was this? This was about 7 o'clock in the morning, Singapore time, by the time I woke up. Yeah, the coffee was much appreciated. For the main part of my breakfast, having learned from my mistake with the main course of dinner, I decided to order the British option on a British airline. I went for another cup of coffee and a full English breakfast. This was quite nice. A tad watery, but given this food has essentially been sat on the plane for about 12 hours at this point, it really wasn't that bad. It was hot, delicious, and importantly filling. I didn't take a video of my empty plate, but trust me, I finished it all. Before too long, we were making our approach into British airspace, and the plane began its slow descent into London Heathrow Airport. Unfortunately, I was sat in a middle row seat, and so I wasn't able to film the landing. However, it was smooth, and we touched down into Heathrow at about 5 a.m. One big plus point for British Airways is that it has an arrivals lounge at Heathrow Airport, which business class customers can use. This is a real advantage because when you step off a 14-hour flight, being able to go get a few cups of coffee, have a hot shower, and have a second breakfast, or what's effectively lunch to you by the time you factor in time difference, was really nice. A full English breakfast was provided, and as you can see here, the quality was quite a bit higher than that served on the air, although that's perfectly understandable. They also had a selection of meats and cheeses, and also had this tap, which provides sparkling water. There were canned soft drinks available if you wanted, but it was a little early for me. I did a DIY make-your-own bacon sandwich and had one of these pastry things. For coffee, I went for a double espresso. This was pretty decent. They also served sparkling water. They had sparkling wine available if you wanted it, but it was a little bit early for me. After staying in the lounge for about 2 hours, and having had a shower, I made my way into central London. Overall, there was nothing terrible about this flight. It served a purpose, I got a good night's sleep, and I was reasonably comfortable for the 14 hours. That said, it has to be noted that a 242 configuration in business class really is rare these days. Most operate on a 1-to-1 configuration, effectively giving you double the space. I checked for price comparison websites, and British Airways is pretty much charging exactly the same as Singapore Airlines and Cathay Pacific for the Asia to London route. In my opinion, you're better off going with them.